We're speaking with former Attorney General and Governor William Janklow today. You were the Attorney General of South Dakota for 4 years as Chief Law Enforcement Officer. You were the Governor of South Dakota for 16 years. You're in private law practice now. You've been a lawyer for more than 40 years and handled some pretty high-profile cases. I'd like to talk to you about pornography, and especially pornography in the workplace, why it's a problem. You've been involved in both civil and criminal investigations throughout your career and as the Chief Executive Officer of South Dakota. Why is it a problem?
Well, it's a problem for a lot of reasons. The first reason that it's a problem is you have to understand it's cumulative. Nobody goes onto a porno site voluntarily one time. They go on the porno site for a reason. And once you go on one, it becomes addictive. It's one, and then it's two, and two, and then it's four, and four, and then it's eight. It becomes a habit, but more importantly, it becomes addictive. People that do this are addicted to it. That's the first big thing. It's cumulative and it's addictive. The second big thing, which is incredibly important, is everybody doesn't do it by themselves. Almost by definition, pornography is of a communal nature.
So it's a legal problem, it's a workplace problem.
First of all, it's a workplace problem. That's really important. The second thing about the workplace and about the problem, why do people access porno? It isn't to watch a Hollywood movie. It isn't to entertain themselves. They're appealing to their own prurient interest. That's what they're doing. By definition, they're dealing with arousal, with sexual arousal of their body. That's dangerous out there to the community because it's not a very big step from being sexually aroused to doing something of a violative sexual nature. Very few rapists just walk down the street and rape somebody. Very few pedophiles just walk down the street and snatch or grab a child or assault a child. What they're doing is satisfying these interests that they have. And pornography by definition fulfills the mandate of appealing to those kinds of interests. And once the hormones start running, once the chemicals in the body start moving and working, once you become sexually aroused, you become dangerous. And that's incredibly important. Another factor is that doesn't deal with the danger factor, the waste. When I was in public life, when I was the governor of South Dakota, we had some complaints about a couple individuals in a particular department were abusing the internet, abusing the computer because they were reading newspapers and they were doing stuff that wasn't government business. When we ran a computer check from our Information Technology Bureau of the computers in just that one office, we found the biggest violative problem was folks accessing pornography. And in a little state like ours, South Dakota, we then did a statewide check of all the government employees in the executive branch, and we found several hundred that ended up being disciplined, either being fired, being suspended from their work, and things of that nature for accessing pornography. It was a far greater thing than any of us ever dreamt. As a matter of fact, after we ran into that, I copied St. Paul, Minnesota. I learned about St. Paul when I was a patient at Mayo Clinic. I saw a little blurb in a newspaper. I sent staff up to visit with them from South Dakota, and we set together a program that involved the state highway patrolmen and retired law enforcement officers, a very small group, for internet crimes against children, we call it. We put on a statewide conference. We had 2,000 people show up for this conference, school teachers, the clergy, parents, PTAs, service clubs and organizations, things of that nature. And we brought in experts from all over the country. We found out, for example, that if you hit BritneySpears.com, 11 different misspellings would get you to a porno site. At that point in time, WhiteHouse.com got you to a nude bar in Washington, D.C. You had to go to WhiteHouse.gov. Now, that no longer is the case. I know that's been changed, but WhiteHouse.com got you to a nude site. And it's just incredible what was out there. And people like me, the old fogies, we don't know this stuff exists because it's not a world we ever dealt with. It's not a world we ever knew about. And we were kids, they used to call them girly magazines. It was the penthouses and the magazines, the Playboys and things of that nature. This is far more dangerous out there. The lewd, the lascivious, the dangerous, the arousing, the cumulative nature of this makes it very, very dangerous to children, very dangerous to women, and incredibly uneconomic for the capitalistic marketplace.
We're both lawyers. Let's talk about liability.
Okay.
And the workplace, both government and private industry. Why should administrators really be concerned and detect this kind of activity?
Well, I think it's incredibly important that administrators look at this kind of activity. One, this isn't what you're paying people by the hour for. This isn't what you're paying people a salary for. You're not paying individuals to sit and look at pornography on the internet. The second thing is, you're making it dangerous for employees that work in that marketplace, because if I'm looking up porno, again, I'm appealing to an interest of mine. It's sexually arousing me. Once I get to the point of being sexually aroused, I can be dangerous to my coworkers. In this crazy world, I can be dangerous to males, females, and children. So all of a sudden, a whole new dynamic is taking place. You can have employer liability if you have these kinds of problems and you aren't addressing them. All it takes is one person to hint in some way that you have this problem, you ignore it, and this is the worst kind of, what could be a worse kind of sexual harassment than a sexual assault on somebody? And that's what it is when you go after children. That's what it is when you go after coworkers. That's what it is when you go after anybody.
You've worked a case recently that was quite amazing in the number of hits that a manager was hitting websites. Briefly tell me about it.
This was a fellow who'd been used to work at state government, had been hired away from state government to work for a medical organization that dealt with lowering the costs of medical expense for employees. He was working in that agency. They saw pornography on his computer once. As a matter of fact, the pornography brought down the computers in the office. He claimed it was an accident. They reset everything, had experts come in. The next time they saw it on his computer, they fired him. He then filed a lawsuit claiming all these lost wages and all these conditions, and he had tens of thousands of dollars he claimed coming. We took his computer and we sent it to an expert, a guy named Bill Sporno down in Atlanta, Georgia, a retired federal technology person who just, I'd never met him before. I heard of him, I called him, we hired him. He found thousands between May of 2009, between May of 2009 and September 29th of 2009, 5,000 hits of pornography were on this man's computer. He didn't have a clue what information we had until we took his deposition. Suffice it to say that we went from the fear of a lawsuit, which could have cost the widow of the estate of the man that I was representing tens of thousands of dollars. We'll never pay a dime. We'll never pay a dime.
So the bottom line for administrators, they should have a vigilant program of looking at their computers to make sure their employees are not visiting porn sites.
Look, what employer wouldn't have a program to make sure the folks aren't doing drugs in the workplace? What employer isn't interested in a program to make sure the employees aren't drinking in the workplace? What employer doesn't have a program to make sure that workers aren't hitting on each other with sexual harassment? This is in the same category, only it's more dangerous. What employer shouldn't have in place a program to make sure that you don't have porno experts, porno seekers, and porno doers working for them during the time they're supposed to be employed in the business, the company, the organization, or the government?
And the last question, to bring it down to reality, what kind of potential damages are you looking at if an employer doesn't have this kind of program or ignores it?
Let an employer sexually assault some other employee, and the damages are only limited by a jury's imagination. Let an employee that became aroused working for a particular employer do something in terms of being a pedophile. Let that person cause problems, and the damages can be unlimited, because they're not just limited to dollar damages. You get into emotional distress, you get into those types of things, and then what you're dealing with is what I call heartbound payments, and that is we wrap money around it to make people feel better. That becomes incredibly expensive in today's world.
Thank you.